environmental program is absolutely crucial and important partner for all of us. And the work really putting out some of the work that you're doing in the SIDS region and also discussing the challenges and the opportunities that you see, and also emphasizing the importance of the regional and sub-regional partnerships, which can be very important. Ladies and gentlemen, next on my list would have been somebody who would have taken this approach, regional approach, but unfortunately it looks like that Mr. Franklin Michael is not being able to join us today. However, I hope that you agree. I really strongly feel that we have had an excellent panel providing you with different viewpoints from different member states, UN organizations, working on the ground, and so on. So this, I hope, has truly also provided you with an opportunity to think of how, of your own experiences in this. So the way that we are moving forward now is that I'd like to open the floor to hear from you, your comments, your own experiences, sharing, and questions that you might have. And then in a little bit, we will move into the second part of this afternoon, which is flash presentations by the people you see in the back row here. They will give you some concrete presentation of their project. But now, who would like to take the floor? The floor is open. All right, I will start there, and then you have the second. I'm sorry, I cannot see so can you just please mention? Yes, please, madam, you have the floor.
That's okay. This is for UNOPS or UNOPS. Yes? Okay. So you've been in Trinidad and Tobago, and you have been working, I saw your example. Maybe this is a conversation for after, but I would like to introduce, what do you think you can do, or what sort of partnership could you suggest for the process of local government reform? Think about institutional strengthening and changing the way in which the governance structures actually function. I'm interested in that. So it's for you, but I guess it's for anybody else as well.
Thank you very much. I will take a few questions and comments and then give it back to the panelists. I think the question was on partnerships on local government and suggestions on that. Now, madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the Government of Canada. I'd like to thank the Government of Bahamas for the opportunity to come to this important symposium. And I just wanted to say that Canada has, as another partner, has been very actively involved in the 2030 agenda for the SDGs, the Addis Ababa Action Plan, COP21, and the Sendai Framework. In fact, Canada is going to be hosting the 5th Regional Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction for the Americas in Montreal on the 7th to 9th of March. So welcome anyone who can come to that important forum, and it'll feed into the global platform in May on disaster risk reduction as well. But just to say also that the Government of Canada has been very much focused on climate change, going to COP21 and making an important announcement there for availability of funds in the order of $2.65 billion. And what we've done to kind of figure out how we're going to be working with these funds, we've done an international aid review where we've gone out to the public, to stakeholders, countries, UN organizations, a range of partners, to consult, to find out what it is that we can best offer in terms of our development assistance going forward. And that policy is about to be released within the next weeks or month. And so I think we will see climate change coming forward as something that will be very important. SIDS is an area that we are very important and continue to be important for supporting. And if you've ever seen our Prime Minister talk, because it was 2015, gender equality will also be something that you can look forward to in that policy. So I think there are many ways that we can work together across organizations, locally, and we look forward to carrying that dialogue forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, and providing information on Canada's partnerships and offering partnerships for the SIDS, and also mentioning the 5th regional platform in Montreal on ISDR that prepares the Cancun meeting coming up in May. Anybody else who would like to take the floor at this point? Ambassador Sarrier, yes, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Was very impressed with the presentations. They are very useful, and it has certainly touched upon the importance of the partnerships that was coming out of the framework that was developed by the SAMOA pathway in 2014 SAMOA conference. When we look at the partnerships, I mean, many of the aspects of it has been highlighted by so many viewpoints that was from the presenters. But I just wanted to highlight the comprehensive nature of the SIDS partnership framework. Although we have 300 partnership, registered, there is something that we always talk about, a criteria that we look at as SMART, S-M-A-R-T, which is a SID-specific as one of them, the M for measurability, A for attainable, R for realistic, and T for timely. So this is the guide that we are really looking at these partnerships. But when we are really looking at the partnerships, we are also looking at how we are going to report the partnerships, because the partnerships can be identified. There were quite a number of registered, but then we don't know how many of them are actually attainable or how it is workable. So we have been keeping some sort of a traffic light system as to see what actually works and what does not. So it is importantly, we have been looking at the updates on people's registration of the partnerships. And then we are also looking at how there could be a continuous flow of dialogue within the relevant stakeholders. And now the first, of course, many of this has been highlighted by the presenters. I just wanted to mention a few of them and emphasize on the importance of this dialogue process. Now, one is between the SIDS to SIDS partnerships. Now, how we are engaging, and this particular forum is a clear example of how SIDS are imparting their knowledge, conveying what we have been able to do, what does not work from one country, maybe working in another country. But things that we have done remarkably well, which can be replicated in another country. The governments, one government to the other, which comes to between the SIDS as well as the partners countries, which is also within the governments, the federal systems or the local levels. Then the private sector, which was highlighted by many in the presentations. Then there is also the global partnerships. We are looking at how there could be the international systems could be working together. I think the ultimate success of the SIDS partnership framework would depend on how much we integrate each other between the international systems, between the international agencies, the UN agencies. Very often we talk about within the UN the silo approach between one organization and the other. Sometimes the UNICEF doesn't know what the WHO does, but then they are all doing the same, under the same objective. UNDESA, of course, is being coordinating this, but very often the UNDP in their local communities reaching out to the resident coordinators does not understand how the importance of these dialogue processes. And then again, within the outside the UN agencies, we were having this dialogue yesterday with the World Bank about they themselves doing a lot of, aspects which are very much aligned, which are very much relevant to the SIDS partnership framework, but sometimes may not be quite doing the same, objective. But then how do we align each other? The World Bank, the IMF, or the international processes like the G20, what they do, which could be aligned with the UN system. How do the regional organizations, we have the Caribbean community, we have the Pacific Forum, we have the Indian Ocean various forums. So how do we do the sub-regional organizational work which can be aligned to each other? Then, when we look at this, the partnerships, it is a comprehensive process altogether. And this is again within the UN system itself. Of course, Agenda 2030, when we go into the implementing of the Agenda 2030, the successful implementation is addressing the SAMOA pathway in any way. But then there is also many other processes within the UN system, which we have been, the SIDS have been always talking about how we can seek coherence within the process. We have seen within the UN past few years quite a number of efforts being made and quite successful processes being implemented. The Paris Agreement was, achieved. We have signed up the Paris Agreement. We have the Sendai framework. We have the FFD, the Finance for Development, the Habitat. All these are all moving towards the same direction. But how do we align each other, trying to not duplicate each other? The one other aspect which I mentioned earlier, but needs so much focus, is the UN Development Program, because UNDP is like the UN ambassador in the respective countries. The UN resident coordinator plays that particular role in harmonizing the UN activities in each and every country of ours. So when we have the UN Development Assistance Framework, UNDAF, which goes into the comprehensive nature of all the UN activities in that particular country, very often that particular process is not quite aligned with what goes on in New York. So I think there is a very much need, even in the recent ECOSOC process of the long-term positioning of the UN. You were talking a lot about how could these maybe more focused, because the SIDS they themselves do not have the capacity to deal with each and every aspect, but the UN agencies who are representing that in the respective countries needs to be focused and the coherence more clearly organized. I think this is the importance of, I just wanted to highlight the comprehensive nature, and overall the whole thing could be looked at in a much more coordinated manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those very important observations. I think also talking about the comprehensive nature of the SIDS partnership framework, as I mentioned earlier on, this is currently co-chaired by Maldives and Italy, and the work that you do and the kinds of things that are being worked on within this context of this partnership framework. I think you also very importantly mentioned something that has not been mentioned so much here before, which is the SIDS partnerships, that also has a lot of potential and possibilities. That would be actually interesting to hear from you if you have some examples of SIDS successful partnerships. It would be, I think, good to hear about. On the issue of the coherence of UN processes at global level, I think this is a very relevant point, not an easy answer thing. Different UN agencies are all working very hard to make sure that they are implementing from their part the relevant global programs. There is, of course, the interagency coordination mechanism on small islands that meets every 3 months or so, 2 months. That is co-chaired by UNDESA and my office, OHR LLS. And we have included also regional partners into that, so they join into these meetings. But it's a really difficult. I think that there's a lot of goodwill, and the UN is trying to do better, but certainly something that can be further developed. And then to linking it to the country level with the offices, that's also quite important, because, as you very much rightly said, the UN resident representative is usually a very important person at the country level towards the country, to make sure that UN on the ground works as one UN and in a coherent manner. There's, of course, a recent review by UN inspectors on UN support to the small islands, and I think some of these things are reflected in the report that they recently came out with. Thank you very much. I will give the floor one more person who has something I can see in the back row over there, and then I will give it back to the panelists. Madam, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandra Messiah. I represent Public Services International, which is a global trade union federation representing over 20 million workers, the very workers who work in the public services and will deliver on a number of the aims and ideas that we want to achieve through the SDGs. I'd like to refer to a UNDESA working paper that throws some caution about the use of PPPs, particularly in developing countries, and particularly to make the points about ensuring that the PPPs really do deliver on the aims that we are seeking to achieve. The country paper actually, the working paper comes from a number of representations that Public Services International made during the Financing for Development Forum. And it points out a number of things with regard to, are the PPPs really delivering for us? And I'd like to piggyback, I believe, on the comments made by the ILO, in that in order to have effective partnerships, we must have effective partners. And it draws on a number of studies that talk about the preparedness of public sector entities within our various countries, and particularly within the developing world. And if I may quote, "Private sector operators reaped the gains in savings in the form of higher profits without passing on benefits to the consumers." And there are a number of cases that we have put together in our various studies from Public Services International on the challenges. The evidence, again, another quote, suggests that PPPs have often tended to be more expensive than the alternative of public procurement, while in a number of instances, they have failed to deliver the envisaged gains in quality of service provision, including its efficiency, coverage, and development impact. Be grateful for some reactions from the panel to some of those comments, as well as to the entire paper, the working paper from UNDESA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. I see one more, and I will do that, but then we'll have to unfortunately close these comments for this panel, because we have our flash presenters just waiting. But one more, Madam.
Just a small comment. I'll try to be very, very brief. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to panelists for the very interesting presentation. For my country, partnership is the key. I mean, we are small, not only small, but we are a lack of a lot of, our resources are very limited. If it were not for international cooperation and really effective partnership, I'm sure that we would not be graduated right now. So, but if you deal with development issues and climate change, you do see a lot of partnership going on everywhere, especially with implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. My question and my concern also is that even though we see a lot of partnership going on, we still need more. But the thing is, there is a there is a fragmentation of actions, but a lot of time there is also for SIDS that has a limited human resource to know where are those partnerships, how you can tap into some partnership. Even though we have this framework for a SIDS partnership, but still I feel the need that, for instance, you are implementing SDG 1. There is this need to know where do you find information about what is going on everywhere in terms of SDG 1 or 2 or 3. And then also to avoid duplication. Because there is not this sharing information or a database that you know what is going on in every SDGs, and then I'm sure that there is a lot of institutions that could be duplicating what they do. Even within United Nations, there is a lot of things going on at the same area that sometimes is conflicting or is duplicated. What I wanted to ask is how can we do this in terms of avoiding duplication and being more coherent in our implementation? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that there have been very interesting comments and questions, and I truly apologize for anybody who did not get the opportunity to take the floor right now. But I hope that in the next sessions also you will be able to comment, because this partnership issue, I think, is a cross-cutting and will also be relevant for upcoming sessions. So there was a very interesting range of comments and questions from suggestions of local government partnerships to the issue of the trade union and the caution on the PPPs and also the how to avoid duplication and coherence. So perhaps I will start by giving the floor to Grete, to you, because you got the first direct question. So short comments back. Thank you.
So UNOPS or UNOPS? A loving child has many names, so you can call me whatever. UNOPS is stating clearly that we're a member of the UN family. UNOPS is something you have to listen more carefully to, what is actually this acronym about. I use both. How can we support institutional reform? UNOPS is not a policy organization. We are about implementation. And what I can say in this connection or in this context is that our core values is built on partnerships. It is transparency and accountability. It's about excellence and national ownership and capacity building. So if there is a national plan, or if it's already negotiated as a part of the UNDAF, but where it is a question of where do we find the project management expertise, where do we, the quickest way, hire the experts needed to engage, then we may be able to support. It will always have to come out of the national context. So it will only be where the stakeholders would like us to provide that kind of support that there would be an opportunity for us to work. So it is not in any sense what we could offer, what would a solution look like, but we can sort of support the work that has been decided nationally is important. I would also say that I so much support what was said from a trade union perspective. But looking at the SDGs, we know that ODA will never be sufficient. We know that national resources, public resources, will have to work well together with the private sector. So from the UNOPS perspective, I can say that we qualify as a gold standard procurement organization by international institutes that do such qualifications. And what does that mean? When we procure services, we try to find them locally. We, of course, abide by what is important socially, environmentally, as well as financially. So, of course, respect of labor rights is part of what we offer as a, as I said, chartered gold standard procurement organization. Shared values, I think, is very important working with the private sector. So shared values, how to understand the SDGs. I think many of you have mentioned, how do we report? How do we measure? It's about shared values. Reporting, I think, is really important. So part of our transparency and working and wanted to be held accountable includes reporting. So we have decided, in lack of having a global standard regarding how to report according to the SDGs, to report compliant to the Global Reporting Initiative, because that's the international standard that allows for both social, environmental, and financial reporting. So those were the three key takeaways I wanted to note.
Thank you very much. Next, perhaps I give the floor to Amber to respond to, please.
Sure. You know, I think, unfortunately, there isn't a magic lever that we can just pull that automatically creates jobs. I think that, you know, it takes a lot of deep analysis and knowing that jobs are by and large created in the private sector and at the sectoral level. So with this in mind, the ILO is developing a resource platform that we hope to roll out over the next few months, which will help countries identify, after developing your national sustainable development plans and looking at the decent work dimension of those plans, and being able to look at the interlinkages with the various SDGs and looking at the employment impacts of those plans. So that when, for instance, in SIDS, prioritizing oceans, for example, or climate change, what are the job creation potential or the negative potential that certain policies may have? So this is a tool that the ILO is looking at, and part of that also that we're very pleased to be able to offer it will have a partnerships component to it as well. So this should be helpful. And on the PPPs from our colleague from PSI, again, I mean, I think that this is really a crucial element that we all must consider when we do engage with the private sector. Certainly the private sector we do need to engage with, but again, we need to be sure that we're not just chasing the resources, that we are in fact looking at effective partnerships with effective partners. And I think that's the main message that we really have to think about when we engage with the private sector. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Amber. I'm looking at the other panelists, whether you have any, no? Christina, no? No, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'd like to invite you to join me to really thank the panelists for excellent presentations. So why don't we give them a applause? And we will immediately move to a very